I cannot wait to introduce you to our next guest, Reuven Gorsht.
At some point, I think my parents got the call that they were going to kick me out of school, and they forced me to get into gear. You can't put me in the finance department for half an hour. Like, I'll start breaking stuff. Our vision, our goal is to make that home ownership journey enjoyable, right? It's a precious moment. Most people look forward to it their entire lives.
Do you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a year?
Yeah.
Take us back, man. Paint that picture for us.
The journey to get there is painful, like people.
Welcome to another episode of 100 Ways to Make $100K. I cannot wait to introduce you to our next guest, Reuven Gorsht. Now, he started something called MoveSnap and sold it to a big company, but that's not what we're going to be focused on today. He started a new venture. It's called Deeded, Deeded.ca. Now, he's not a lawyer, and I know he doesn't look like one, but he could definitely show them a thing or two. So, Reuven, I can't wait for you to tell us a little bit more about Deeded. I can't wait to dive into your story, learn about the way that you made $100K for the very first time. You ready to tell us about the first time or what?
I'm ready. I'm pumped. I'm excited. Absolutely.
So you know what, just so that people could get an understanding of what it is that you're up to now, let's just let them know what Deeded is, and then we'll dive into the story. Sound fair?
Yeah, absolutely. So Deeded essentially is a platform to close your real estate transaction. So think about when you're purchasing a property, when you're selling a property, maybe when you're refinancing your mortgage, you're going to have to close a deal. What that means is you're going to need to get legal help and do all the paperwork and move money and all that good stuff. Essentially, what we've done is we've streamlined that process. So brought it into the 21st century, made it a lot more transparent and seamless. And we've seen a lot of success so far.
Yeah. When did you start this?
We actually started in March of 2020, believe it or not. You know what happened 2 weeks after? The world kind of stopped. You can take a nap across the 401 for a good half hour, and super exciting time.
So how long before COVID happened did you, because the thing is, like, this is perfectly positioned, right? Like, this is, well, I mean, the lawyer's transaction has always relatively been remote, but I mean, as soon as COVID happened, everyone was okay with everything being remote, you know, as like the norms changed. But how long before COVID did you start working on this project?
About 4 or 5 months at the most.
Oh, wow.
Right? So literally that year, and we got a small team together. We got a small office together, and literally March 1st of 2020 was our first day at the office, let's call it that. And then 2 weeks later, we were getting a notice from our landlord to basically come and pick up our stuff because they were going to be locking down the office. And the rest is kind of history.
Yeah, that's exciting. So before we dive into the journey and, you know, some of the nuances that happened, this was right after you retired.
Yeah, exactly. So my retirement consisted of, I was going to, actually, speaking of which, I was going to read, I've been buying business books for years and years. I've got a pretty big library at home of all sorts of business books. I'm kind of love the art of acquiring knowledge and all that stuff.
What's your favorite book?
I've got
right
lots
now, today.
Lots of them.
Favorite book for somebody that's about to start an adventure?
I'd say, like, Good to Great's a classic. Another one is like Made to Stick, because I'm big geek on marketing stuff and things like that. So hard to say, right? But I've got all these books that I've been buying. I said, hey, you know what? I'm going to take time off and I'm going to actually dive into all these books. And I got to the third page of my first book, and I said, like, screw it. I can't do it. My anxiety level's going up. I got to think of something else to do. So that was the length of my retirement. Literally
3 minutes.
3 minutes, 3 pages. I'm not that slow of a reader, but yeah, that makes sense.
All right. So in Good to Great, they talk about this thing called the hedgehog principle, where, there's the fox that runs sly and goes, from one thing to another, versus the hedgehog who takes his time, curls up in a ball and takes his defense, right? And they use this analogy throughout the book of being able to focus on just like kind of like one thing. How would you describe your hedgehog principle? Because I could see the potential in what it is, right? And it's oftentimes, not often, that you meet someone and you're like, oh, okay, this guy's got it, Like, I remember when you were on stage, I'm like, okay, this guy's got the juice, this is the guy. You were literally the first person that I met at the conference too, which was the funniest part. But if you were to simplify, Deeded and what it is that you're doing now into its like most basic and core principles, how would you describe it?
I would say ultimately everyone's looking for simplicity of, especially when it comes to something that's antiquated and complex, right? Nobody speaks legal. Everybody speaks, English or whatever your first language that you speak, right?
Yeah.
So ultimately, we brought in the principles that exist in the consumer world. One principle being tracking and transparency. So in your typical world today, you're closing on a real estate transaction. For most people, buying a home is the largest transaction they'll ever do.
Yeah.
So needless to say, your stress level and anxiety are sky high because you're freaking out. You don't want to make a mistake. A mistake is gonna cost you, your life savings potentially. Yet when you're in that last mile of the deal, we call it a little bit of a black hole effect. Nobody knows what's going on. Papers flying back and forth. You're like, what's happening? When do I get my keys? What's going to happen next? How do I get the money over? What programs or rebates am I eligible for? Tons and tons of questions, right? And ultimately, you don't know what's going on. So we took the very principle of, that's now 35 years old, Domino's Pizza Tracker, right? Domino's, believe it or not, 35 years ago came up with this idea. It's like people just want to know where their pizza's at, right? Because they're hungry, they deserve to know. And they came up with this pizza tracker. It's very antiquated now, but obviously copied into everything. It's Uber, it's Amazon, everyone's got the tracker. But closing a real estate transaction didn't have that tracker, which means like, hey, we're still living in the old world. And there's a lot of industries like this, insurance and financial services, where it's still very old school. Dial the phone, leave a voicemail, wait for the call back, miss the call back, get a voicemail, even fax, right?
Yeah.
So, just modernizing features like that ultimately put the consumer in the driver's seat. Is just one of the things that we've done. Like the other aspect is being able to do and sign your documents virtually. Believe it or not, you can sign for your real estate contract virtually. DocuSign's been around, I think 2004 kind of became the norm in Canada. It took a little while, but signing your legal documents means you got to now take a day off, go downtown, park the car, go into a lawyer's office, wait for 20 minutes, sign the documents, and then, walk away with your stack of paper all overwhelmed and stuff. Now, virtual, obviously, it is what it is. You can sign from home. You can sign from, your lunch shower at work. You can sign from the beach if you like, right? We've had funny story in the early days, we've had someone sign as they're driving their Tesla.
It's crazy.
Not recommended, right? You got to keep your eyes on the road, but literally you can sign your documents virtually. Now, the difference is, other than a convenience, is it also, in everything that I constantly emphasize is about the human connection and the experience, right? So we're taking a typical situation that's high stress, right? But when you're in your own environment, when you're in the comfort of your living room or whatever, and you're there signing documents, even if it is virtual, you get that feeling of ease. You don't get that feeling that, it's like sometimes you go to the doctor and they say, hey, I've got, you feel the pressure, right? I got 10 minutes and I can't, I gotta tell them what's going on. And then, there's 60 other people in the waiting room type of thing. So it just relieves that anxiety. And ultimately we want, like our vision and our goal is to make that home ownership journey enjoyable, right? It's a precious moment. Most people kind of, look forward to it their entire lives, but the journey to get there is painful. Like people cry and they have nervous breakdowns, and they turn into completely different people when they face that anxiety. So that's ultimately what we've been able to do, and we've seen thousands of folks now coming back and saying, wow, this was next level. You've answered all my questions. You made me feel like a human. Put me at ease.
Wow.
And and I could tell you honestly, not for a second did we even anticipate that level of feedback coming in. And then we sort of realized that we're onto something.
Wow. So take us back to meet the Reuven before Deeded, the Reuven before Move Snap, right? Like, you're this big corporate guy. Maybe you could tell us a little bit about your background and how you even got here.
Yeah, I mean, my maybe start my journey as sort of a teenager, didn't do well in school.
From where though? You're in Toronto?
Yeah, here in Toronto. Yeah, I mean, wasn't a great student or anything, and
you look like a troublemaker,
It's at some point I think my parents got the call that they were going to kick me out of school, and they forced me to get into gear. But ultimately, when I finished university, it's a little bit of a different time economically. Entered the corporate world. Had my parents were working class people, so they're always get a job, climb the ladder, do your thing, and that's what I ended up doing. What I didn't know is it would be like a good 20 years of doing that. So started in one company. I've always been an entrepreneur, I'd say, but even within the constraints of a bigger company, I've always been the one that, hey, I've got an idea, and if I had a manager or a boss that would say, you know what, yeah, go do it. Even go do it on the side. Go do it on your free time. I'd take every single advantage.
What was the first one?
The first one was I was working for a consulting company, and we had a lot of different consultants, but not a good system to manage their time and booking for like resource management.
Okay.
And we were managing them on a spreadsheet, and I said, well, this is like highly inefficient. It's out of date before I even look at it. So I went out and I think back in the day, taught myself SharePoint, and over a weekend just sort of banged out a system, and we started using it, and then everyone's utilization went up. Everyone got busier. We had real-time visibility, and then because I did that, I got some more opportunities to do that, and even do that with clients as well.
Wow! And was this kind of like your first real exposure to this whole tech? Because as I've gotten to know you, one thing that I continue to see is your curiosity and passion for trying new technologies.
Yeah.
Every time I talk to you, you're like, yeah, I'm just tinkering with this thing. Oh, did you know that you could do this thing on this thing? And it's like, yeah. Reuven, when do you find the time to play around with this stuff? But more importantly, when did you first find that interest and actually start going down that rabbit hole?
I think just looking back, it goes even to my childhood, right? Like when I had it's funny, my parents would say, you don't have a single toy. And the reason I didn't have any toys is because I took them all apart. Because I wanted to know, every toy car I had, literally, I remember, getting into my dad's tool drawer and opening up the cars and figuring out how everything works. Now, I don't think I did a great job putting them back together, but I took them apart. And even when it comes to, technology, we had, the fortune of having, computer in the early days, this is dating myself, but tape drives and cassettes and all that stuff. But I've always had that, and I don't think I think even as I get older, I'm always curious to know what's out there, because I think personally, I think I'm cheating myself if I'm not exposed to some of the stuff. Doesn't mean I use it on a day to day, but just finding out what's going on, what's new, and spending some time looking at things and seeing how it's applicable to my business, how it's applicable to my life, how it's applicable to my friends and family that are around me, that sort of stuff.
Wow. So do you remember the first time you made $100,000 in a year?
Yeah.
Take us back, man. Paint that picture for us.
Wasn't anything fancy. I think it was just climbing that corporate ladder. Working hard, getting my 2%, 5% increases until you get up there, and it sort of shows up on your paycheck. And I think those are the days when you sort of look back and you realize after taxes it's really not that much. So it wasn't it wasn't all that glorious.
Yeah. So then how did things unfold after that? Because you obviously became an entrepreneur.
Yep.
And like you mentioned, this first experience building the real-time visibility on billable hours, was probably something that really scratched that itch for you. Like, what other projects did you create between that moment and MoveSnap? Lots.
Yeah. I've moved to a couple companies, and every time, again, an opportunity came up. I remember I was working for a large software company, and this was the iPad was just announced, right?
Okay.
And everybody's kind of looking at it. It's like, it's a toy, it's a fad, it's not really going to apply to business. And I got a small team of us that were sort of looking at and said, well, this will make a huge difference because everybody's going to do business on a tablet. Dude, and the stuff that you can do
any restaurant, right?
Yeah, so we sort of decided to go and we bought our own MacBooks on the side because the company wouldn't allow it. We developed some apps on the side just to demonstrate the power of it, and we ended up we had this massive event every year. And we ended up developing the first 10 apps and literally got recognized by the CEO and the board of the company just for doing that as a side project, right?
And it's literally the thing that you put your money into, that you spent your weekends on, ends up being this like defining moment, right? At least so it seems.
Yeah. And it's all, I mean, the way I look at it, it's all, it may not be a financial reward right away, but it's all building, it's all pieces of the puzzle that eventually, like that experience and other experiences I always take away. And sometimes you think at a distance, like, well, what does it have to do with what I'm doing now? And what does it have to do with my success or my failures or whatever? And the answer is everything, right? Because every experience you have, whether it's a success or a failure, just shapes you, right? And eventually you kind of start recognizing some of those patterns. So after, so many years of, call it tinkering or call it whatever you want, you kind of get a sense that, it's ongoing. And eventually when you do enough of that, you'll stumble onto your next opportunity that will pay you that $100,000.
So right? what was your role in these companies, man? Like, were you in like the R&D department or
no?
Like, what were you doing?
So I've done different roles, but I think, and all the way to like a global VP level. So getting, pretty senior up there as I progressed through the companies and my work was recognized. And again, I've always been fortunate to have, amazing bosses and leaders that would just say, hey, you know what, we recognize, what you want to do and give me that freedom to do it. I mean, as long as, the objectives were met and all that sort of stuff. Right. I mean, I think, overall it was more, I would consider myself more of a generalist. And I think I found that out probably in the last 5 years of my corporate career, is that I didn't belong in a department, right? Because typically you have a company, you have, finance and HR and the production floor and the tech and the R&D, your product. And I'm like, I know a little bit about everything just to get by. I'm not deep on anything. Like you can't put me in the finance department for half an hour. Like I'll start breaking stuff, right? But I know a little bit about product, and I know about sales and marketing, and my last gig was more around something called go to market, which is like the company I was working for. We had 3,000 some odd products, and then you have to figure out how to build the puzzle of what product do you sell, where and how, which channel, and all that stuff. So again, great experiences that I wouldn't trade for the world, working with some of the smartest people on the planet that have, all accumulated over the years and into these experiences that I cherish.
So when did you kind of like make that transition out? Right? Like you speak so highly of this corporate experience, but now you're the farthest from corporate.
Yeah.
I mean, like, and you had something before this that was still relatively far from corporate, which I'm excited to dive into and learn a little bit more about. But how did you end up creating MoveSnap? And were there any projects that you created before that? I know you mentioned there was tons, but were there any that ended up making it big? Like, because they didn't make it to the LinkedIn, but I know there's I know there's some chapters in there.
Yeah, there were quite a few. I mean, I mentioned like the apps and all that stuff. We've created some products, and I've had the fortune of actually working with some of the biggest brands in the world, like the Apples and the Amazons and the Under Armours, and helping their innovation as well, because they bringing some of those concepts to life. So I've seen a lot, but in terms of my own, I sort of came to a point in my career where the well was sort of drying out, right? My boss was getting ready to to retire.
Okay.
I had a new boss that, wanted some, rigid, wanted his own things done his own way, and I wasn't given that freedom anymore.
Okay.
I tried to scratch that itch desperately, and I got, I started writing and blogging and speaking and all that sort of stuff just to get, just to get some more drive. I didn't feel like I was using my full potential, but it wasn't enough. And I, started the process of looking maybe for a startup to join, because your learning curve in a startup typically is like hockey stick. There's always, you're wearing multiple hats, you're learning a ton. Didn't really find anything that I was passionate about. So I finally decided, I call it burn the boats. And that's the day that I kind of said, you know what, I'm out.
Wow.
And I'm going to give this a try. And if it doesn't work, worst comes to worst, I'll be back in a couple of years, beg for my job back.
Yeah. Wow. And then, so you leave this job, and now what? Did you already have something on the side that you were working on, like an idea?
Well, yeah. We had the idea and some validation, and MoveSnap was essentially an idea that everybody moves home. On average, people move about 7 to 10 times during their life.
Okay.
And every single time, it's a super stressful thing to do.
Yeah. You
gotta change your address, you gotta change your utilities, you gotta change your IDs, you gotta book your movers. And in fact, we learned even a little bit later on that moving is like the third most stressful thing that people do, next to like death and divorce, right?
Okay, wow.
So so we knew, again, we were onto something. The question is, how do you solve for it? So it ended up being essentially a platform that's more of a concierge that tells, you tell it, hey, I'm moving from this city to that city, and they'll say, hey, Javon, here's your plan. Here's what you got to do. And similar to what we're doing at Deeded, like puts you back in that driver's seat, right? It doesn't overwhelm you. The only thing that really existed at the time was a checklist. And the checklist would be as generic as like, hey, don't forget to, microchip your dog when you're moving. And I go, well, I don't even have a dog, right?
Yeah.
Right. So we made it more personalized, and then we put a human element. We actually put we had a concierge desk, and call this concierge and say, hey, I'm moving and I got an issue. We had someone, for example, that had a massive gun collection in the basement.
Okay.
And they said, well, we're moving. What do we need? What do we need to do? How do we organize? And we're talking massive, right? Like a truckload of, guns and ammo,
Holy
antiques,
smokes.
worth a lot of money. And the concierge's job would be to do all the legwork to figure out, like, hey, who handles firearms, right? Who could do that safely? What's the quote? What's the timing? What permits do you need to get? And literally take that stress away.
Wow.
From the person that's moving, right?
Okay, so you're working with all these GTM strategists all over the world, and now you've got MoveSnap, which is your little baby. Was it just you and a partner?
Me and a partner. Yeah,
me and a partner. So you guys are working on this idea.
Yeah.
And how did you even come up with it? Were you like moving or something, and you're like, this is pretty stressful?
That as well. But so we kind of we sat down and we narrowed some ideas. We had a bunch of ideas, and both of us had a passion for real estate. I wouldn't say it's a passion, but we knew that we'd experienced the pain. I'd experienced the pain moving. He'd experienced some different pain. So we literally went and put together a prototype, put together a pretty basic design. And I remember like spending the first 3 months driving around, taking any meeting of anybody that would give me 3 minutes of their time for feedback. Our first couple ideas they're good, but you could sense that people were not excited. And I kind of used a little bit of the acid test to say, you know what, we got an idea. What do you think about it? And the last question I would ask is, if somebody says, I really love it, just to make sure that they're not, polite or not being Canadian, right? I would say, well, wonderful. Can I have your credit card so that when it comes out, you can be the first customer? So if they were reluctant to give me the credit card, I knew that, perhaps they were just trying to be nice, right? Like, I know we don't want to hurt someone's feelings, say, your baby's ugly or it might not work. Till we hit till we hit that moving concierge idea, and that, and on the go-to-market side, we have to, I think there's so many amazing products out there, and there's so many amazing talented people, engineers and such, but no product ever becomes successful, and no company, unless you know where and who you're selling it to and where's the value prop. Right. 100%. So in the case of MoveSnap, the value prop wasn't it was for the consumer. But how do you get to that consumer, right? Because we're moving geez, you might move tomorrow, right?
Yeah, literally.
So we figured out by talking to a lot of different people, and one of the folks that stood out as a profession was the real estate agent, who basically says, hey, you know what? I am signing a contract with my clients, and they sign and they're all happy, right? They pop that bottle of champagne. Then my clients wake up the next day and say, oh man, what did we sign up for? Now we got like 30 days to pack up,
3 couches, 4 beds, 3 bathrooms, our kitchen, our living room, our entertainment area, our wine collection, our gun collection,
everything.
So many,
right?
Yeah.
And then the stress goes up, and then that experience is not great, right? Yeah. Like, in fact, most realtors, like, the one thing they hate hearing is like, oh my God, we're never moving again, right? That's not good for business, is it? Right. Yeah. So we, once we found that out, it really, became about, getting consistent feedback, understanding what's helpful for them. Wow. Do you want your brand on it? Do you want your own vendors and all that sort of stuff, right? And just snowballed from there.
So you ended up, instead of focusing on the actual customer, focus on the person who has access to the customer almost. And would you give them a commission, or was this just like, no, this is just a better experience for you? Just choose.
No, in fact, the product added enough value that we were able to charge for it. Okay. Right? So we had distribution that we were actually charging for, because we were providing that concierge service. So now, as an agent, a lot of agents do great work, but they're always challenged when it comes to commission, right? And everybody thinks they're paying too much. So now you're able to put that additional service on your plate to say, hey, by the way, Javon, when you're working with me,
you get this as well. Yeah,
don't stress,
so
right?
Now you're charging the realtors for this.
Yeah.
So the realtors now become your customer, not just the end user. So it's kind of like 2 for 1, like you're double dipping right now. Not right now, obviously.
No. I mean, in essence, I wouldn't call it double dipping. I would call it, we're adding value to all the parties, and ultimately, like, finding, what the end user needs, what does their channel partner need, and ultimately, our goal was, how do we get them the next 5 deals?
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
Because it's all, like real estate, mortgages, insurance, lawyers, they're all a referral-based business, right? You don't just, go on the internet and search up, a real estate agent, right? So ultimately, if you're an agent and you're in the business, you want people to rave about you, right? You want to have, the housewarming party, and you want anybody that asks them to say, hey, how is your agent? Oh, let me tell you, they got me this concierge. I didn't have to worry about my gun collection, right? I slept at night.
Yeah, fair enough, man. So how big did you end up growing this thing?
We grew tremendous market share. I think at some point we were doing about 30% of MLS listings had had our
and MLS listings in what region though?
In Ontario. Okay. And then we expanded. So that was our measure. Like what percentage of the moves can we, actually.
And what did you just count the number of houses sold?
Yeah.
And compared to your number of transactions that you guys dealt with?
Exactly.
And what years were you running this thing?
So this was, I think we started in late 2015 and through, we exited about late 2018.
Okay, so like a little 4 year run.
Yeah.
Now, I'm guessing this was the first time you made $100,000 in a month?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That's exciting, man. How did it feel?
It felt awesome, and it wasn't the financial that felt awesome. The financial is just validation.
Yeah.
But to me, it's the validation that your idea that you just literally hatched from a PowerPoint or maybe a couple napkins, lots of drives, lots of meetings, lots of conversations now has legs.
Okay. And that must have been like very gratifying, seeing like, oh wow, like this is working, like let's keep going, right? It's almost like addicting. Yeah. And I'm guessing that's probably why your retirement lasted 3 minutes. You're like, man, I gotta do something again. Like this is so boring. That's crazy. And now I know you exited this one. Yeah. Was this your first exit?
Yeah.
What was that experience kind of like?
I think it was great. I mean, in hindsight, we didn't know what we didn't know. So
Yeah.
I think it was, the company was growing, but we were looking for, different ways to scale. Do we raise money? Because the company was entirely bootstrapped, spent a bunch of time trying to raise money.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, this acquisition interest comes up that was, well aligned with our ambitions. And then we had to kind of, there was a little bit of a fork in the road and decide. And I think the more time you let pass, is like you gotta catch that momentum. So we decided to go towards the exit route. So ended up selling it to Royal Bank. Had a phenomenal time.
So you
there.
could say who? You can't say the price though.
No. So, but that gave us also the platform to scale things up. So all of a sudden, our small team at the time grew in multiples. We were in a serious office building on Bay Street.
So wait, after you sold, you stayed on the company. How long was that for?
About a year.
Okay, so like 2019.
Yeah.
So this is really not a very long time that you were retired for.
Well, I told you, 3 minutes or 3 pages. Right?
Yeah. That's crazy. So what were some of your favorite moments from MoveSnap? Like there must have been a couple, and it doesn't have to be like, yeah, man, we spent a couple nights in the office. Like I'm talking about some of the lessons that you carried with you. Right, like I almost kind of want to transition this into Deeded, right, and understand some of the things that you learned throughout that MoveSnap experience that you carried on, forward with you into Deeded into this day, right? Like in the ethos and how you're building this thing. There was go to market, there was marketing, there was product, there was understanding the customer. There might have been a way that you went about surveys. There might have been a way that you went about partners. Like I'd love to hear some of the things that us and the people that are listening might be able to take and maybe digest, right? Like it's cool. It's great to hear your story, but it's like, I know you learned some lessons from this. You're a very critical thinker, bro. You're breaking down everything and thinking about it, right? So you must have thought through and through about some of the things that have impacted you. And sure, you might drive home and a new one might hit you, but that's fine. I'm still curious as to what's sitting on the tip of the tongue now.
So I'm going to tell you that this is going to be a really awkward example that I still remember.
Why awkward?
So we were in a trade show.
Okay.
And I went to the bathroom.
Okay.
And I was in, doing my thing, and there's two gentlemen that came next to me.
On either side.
And it's not going where you think it is.
Okay.
But next thing I hear them say, "Hey, did you see the MoveSnap guys are here?" Right? And they don't know me. I'm just doing my thing, right? And I think the other gentleman says, "Yeah, I use it. It's amazing. You gotta, make sure you stop by. Go have a chat with them."
Okay.
And I'm like, I was just a fly in the wall. Right?
Yeah.
And so that was in one sense, it's a moment of validation. But before validation, if there's only one lesson, if you ask me to kind of distill it down, it is to really thrive on feedback. Right. Okay. A lot of times, we have an idea, get excited, you start going to the drawing board, you start building, you start coding, and then maybe 5 months, 6 months later, ta-da, here we go. It's like, oh, wait,
we don't like it.
That's not what I want.
Like mustard was last year.
Exactly.
Like we're onto burgundies now. Why would you want something?
Exactly.
Mustard. Okay.
So a lot of folks miss the opportunity to talk and have open conversations and learn from every conversation. Go to industry experts. Find out what they like. Have them be honest. Like challenge them. Say, hey, you know what? Fantastic. You told me you like my stuff. Give me a credit card number. Yeah. And I'm serious. I said that dozens of times.
Yeah. And you say it with a smile, so it's like
I do, but I'm not saying it as a joke. I'm saying that as like ultimately, you vote with your wallet. So if you're telling me this is a good idea, hey, why don't you
prove it?
Why don't you prove it? Pre-buy it, right? And so getting that feedback and also incorporating it back to your product.
Okay.
So feedback is one thing, listening and understanding or whatever. But when your user realizes, like, so if we have a conversation today and you say, well, I got, a couple ideas for Deeded or whatever, and next time you use it, say in a couple months from now, it's like, wow, my idea is in there. It's come to life. You're going to get raving fans, right? And that's, and that's what we're doing with Deeded. That's what we've done before is just listen more than we that we talk, right?
So how do you frame the conversation for that? So let's say, for instance, you're starting this platform, right? And the platform is called MoveSnap.
Yeah.
And you got this idea for it. What's kind of like your first move? Right? Like, so you probably thought about a bunch of different professionals that might be able to use this. Like, walk us through kind of like the steps that you did to actually put that into action, right? Because I've got ideas.
Yep.
You know, Lee's got ideas. Lasai's got ideas.
Yep.
Eli's got ideas. You know, some of the people listening have ideas that they're just working away and constantly tinkering. And like, dude, we all have friends that have been working on the same ideas for like a year and a half. And it's like, you haven't even talked to a customer yet, right?
Yep.
So how would you recommend pressure testing the idea before it's even real?
Get whatever you need as a way to articulate that idea.
Okay.
In my case, you know, when you're building software, it's important. People are visual. So we got a designer and paid a couple $100 to get prototypes on a piece of paper, right? But at the very least, I can go to a potential customer or partner and say, here's what we're thinking. Here's what it might look like.
Well, how did that conversation even start, right? Like, did you just meet this potential partner on the street? Are you sliding in LinkedIn DMs? Are you picking up the phone and making a cold call? Like, how does that pitch go to even get an opportunity like that?
All of the above.
Okay.
And I find, you know, when people will be more than generous with their time and feedback as long as you're coming from a place of integrity and value. So I've been able to get in front of, you know, Fortune 500 CEOs. I've been able to get in front of other entrepreneurs, investors with the same, you know, genuine outreach. Like, understand what that person's about, tell them what you're working on, and you know, be genuine about needing or appreciating their advice. And
so pitch me. Give me an example. So like, I'm a CEO of, I don't know, whatever. Let's say I'm Joe.
Yeah.
Okay. I run this big mortgage company.
Yep.
I have a bunch of team members. You got this program called Deeded. You're working on the idea. How would you pitch someone like that if you've never heard of? Well, maybe not never heard of them, but you maybe came across a LinkedIn profile.
I don't pitch.
Okay.
I want to genuinely understand what that person is about, what their business is about, what are their principles about, right down to the nitty-gritty details. So the conversation is going to be 95% about them and their business, and the other 5% is about kind of sharing how I may be able to add value and to get their feedback.
And then are you trying to get feedback right then in that first conversation? Is it, let's set up some time to chat? Is it, I guess it takes all shapes and sizes in just whatever way that you could meet the person where they're at, right?
Well, you have to determine if there's a fit, right? If they're completely, if their business really doesn't match what I'm doing and they can't use the help. I just, came from a lunch meeting, same thing. I asked someone for feedback about something else.
This is the lunch that you pushed me back on.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
That's crazy. So, and they didn't even match.
No,
Reuven, I can't believe you.
No, so same thing. I've got something I'm thinking about. What do you think? And that person's just, their business situation and their environment wasn't really aligned to the idea, and that's at that point it's like, well, thanks very much, I appreciate being your candor and honesty, and move on, right?
And that's really interesting, man. I appreciate you sharing that. I have like a bunch of different ideas right now. So I started doing this exercise recently. I saw it in a YouTube video about how to make more YouTube videos. And they were like, you know what, the best practice that I did was just write down 10 ideas every day, right? And I was like, oh, that's a pretty cool like activity, right? I'm always like, I used to play sports. So I'm always fascinated by what the drills are. Right. It's like, okay, what's the drills that we got to do if we go to practice and lace up? What drills do we need to do to be better at the sport by the time this practice is done?
Right.
So when you think about your own business as a practice, right? Like, some people I know, they scroll on social media and they say, oh, I'm growing my business. And it's like, how? Like, what are you doing? Are you actively DMing people? Are you calling people that are there? Are you commenting on posts? Like, what are you doing other than just like being there? Because like, if you go to the game and you lace up your shoes and you sit on the bench, you're not going to get better. Right? It's like, what's the actual action? So, this one YouTube video said, write down 10 ideas every day. So I started practicing that, and it got maybe 4, 5, 6 days in. And I started running out of ideas. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like all these ideas that I've been thinking about for years that I thought were so sick, now just like that, I pride myself on coming up with sick ideas, and just like that, I'm out of ideas. Right? So then I came up with the best idea. You want to know what the best idea was?
Let's go.
I said, what if I just come up with ideas for the people around me?
Right.
And then I just looked at all the businesses around me, and then I just started coming up with ideas for them. And next thing you know, my whole world opened up. And I'm like, oh, this is like exciting again. Like, this is cool. And so I've just been trying to think like, okay, how do I tell this person that I have an idea for them? You know? And it's like, like you got to call you. I'll be like, yo, Reuven, I got a sick idea for you. You'll be like, okay, call me 6 months from now because I'm too busy for you. But you know, it's been really cool, kind of like sharing that with people and hearing what their feedback is, and you know, if we can actually take this and make this something real, right? Because the last thing that I want to do is sit down for 6 months and work on something, or even a year and a half, work on this idea, and next thing you know, they're like, no, I'm not even interested in this.
So yeah, I mean, I think, well, by the way, we described that there's a word for it. It's called consulting.
That's
consulting, coming up with ideas.
Price going up.
And getting paid for them, right?
Price going up.
You don't have to execute on them, which is the beauty of the consulting industry. But it is about validating even before you get excited. It's you know, again, the idea is your baby. Odds are, there's a couple odds. One is it's not original. Somebody else had that idea. Yeah. Somebody probably tried it before.
No, so all my stuff is original.
100%. 100%. Yeah, there's not another, you know, few billion people that might have come up with something similar, right?
Never.
Not a chance, right? So a couple of things. I mean, first is there's a lot of tools, like, you know, for research, even a Google search. Because one sign is, if you've got an idea that you think is so unique and original, if no one's doing it, there's probably a good reason why they're not doing it, right?
Okay.
It probably doesn't work, or it's not viable, or it's too small of a market, or whatever, right? The other thing is, you know, the ideas are completely overrated. It's all about execution. I think that's, you know, one huge lesson is, you know, people have ideas and they guard them with their life. You know, like I've got people reaching out. I was like, I've got an idea I want to run by you. Okay, wonderful. Okay, I'll give you time. Happy to, you know, but I want you to sign an NDA. I'm like, seriously? Like for your idea? No, that's not going to happen, right? So I think the approach of broadly sharing it. In fact, you know, I've had people come up and say, oh, you know, I love your business. I had the same idea 3 years ago. I say, well, wonderful. Why didn't you do anything about it? Right? Because a lot of people will have the idea, but they just won't take action, like execute, start somewhere, start by having a conversation, start by trying to sell it to someone, start by building a prototype, start by, you know, wherever you need to start to understand what the plan is, right? And it's all about action, like the business plan, and people that, you know, start putting ideas together, and then PowerPoints and financial plans or whatever, all good. And then the first day you go out and it just punches you right in the face. It's not worth anything.
Yeah, 100%, man. So now you retire, you sell this thing at RBC, you read for 3 minutes and 3 pages, and then you come up with this new idea. Yeah. Now we're just talking about ideas are garbage. It's all about execution. Yeah. So talk to me. How the heck did you? No, not yet. Let's relax. Now your turn. I know you have a mic. No, I'm joking. But so what were some of the first moves, and how did you start executing on this thing? I know was it the prototype? Was it just drafting up some ideas? Was it talking to people? Was it like where did you go? Like, walk us through some of the steps that you ended up taking in order to build this thing.
Months of just talking and research, and you know, taking notes, understanding. Now, you know, we're in a space that's, you know, high stakes, that's legal, and you got fintech aspects.
And dude, you're not a lawyer.
I'm not, right? So now I got to go and gain as much knowledge as I can to understand, is this even viable? You know, conceptually, yeah, sounds great. I can make your process more seamless and all that stuff. But in the background, there's a lot of steps, regulated, unregulated, timelines, different customer experiences, different stakeholders in the industry that, you know, maybe are married to the former way of doing things, right? So a lot of those conversations and research to the point that you're like, okay, I think we got something. but then you're still going, right? The definition of a startup is you're just an experiment. So we just start experimenting and try something, and if it works, we do more of it. If it doesn't work, we squash it and try something else.
So how did the idea evolve? Was the idea always the same from day one, or did it go through a bunch of twists and turns and start as one thing and then start taking shape? Like, you seem like this pretty fluid guy, right? And your big emphasis on feedback probably means that you implement the feedback relatively quickly, or at least as fast as you can, right? So what did Deeded start as compared to what it is today?
So the only thing that's constant was our vision to streamline and simplify the closing of a real estate transaction, and that still remains true to this day. The how changed 1,000 times, right? From, the technology, the customer service aspect, the process work, the team. We've changed a lot, and we still keep changing as we're hearing feedback, as we're dealing with different market dynamics. I guess, someone said once, about like software projects, right? Like they always say, well, when does it end, right? When do you know you're finished, right? Never. Well, like, you look at products that have been around forever, like Microsoft Office. When is it ever finished? Like, it started with one version, and even the latest version is probably still being worked on. It's being released, and we're talking about like a word processor and a spreadsheet, right? How much more can you do with a spreadsheet?
A document.
Apparently more. Apparently more, right? Yeah. So it's never done, right? You're always iterating. There's always going to be something new. Now we're, last couple of years, AI has been such a game changer. Really? And I don't think we've even scratched the surface of what AI is able to do, not only in our industry, but every industry. Yeah. Right? I mentioned earlier, like, summarizing any book with ChatGPT, right? Like, it's incredible when you have this technology that's got access to basically all sources of knowledge, everyone's brain, every book that's ever been written, every moment in history, even so much so as capturing tone and emotion and all that stuff. So you can imagine where it's going. It's maybe a little bit scary, but it's a huge advancement that's going to help augment, humankind. Wow.
And where are you using AI in your kind of world today?
A lot within the business. Okay. I think, we are dealing intensively with documents and deadlines and things like that. And AI has really been great at distilling some of these things down, keeping things on track. Personally, I think at least 30% of what I have in terms of like capacity is now being saved by AI, be it, from some simple things to tools that are now, rearranging my schedule or, transcribing calls and all that sort of stuff, right?
That's really cool. Now, what do you think it'll take in order to make $100K a day or in a day at Deeded?
I think we're on the path there, right? So it's more about scaling up, becoming that household brand, and have people understand and realize that there are alternatives. There's a better way to do things. Just like, it took Amazon a good 30 years to become, the app in your pocket that you use to order anything that's on your mind, or the groceries you kind of forgot on your way home. Same thing. It's going to be a long tail journey. But I think, we've definitely seen very strong signals and feedback, again, coming back to that virtuous loop, to get that we're heading in that right path, that people are seeing value, that we're having that impact. Yeah. And as long as you're having that impact, right? Like, you want to be, I just wrote a blog, and I haven't posted it yet, but it's also being that company or being that product. And one of the acid tests as well, I mentioned earlier about, will people pay for it? I started asking the question, well, what happens if we're not around tomorrow? Right? So at MoveSnap, we had a day where it wasn't our thing, but one of the technology providers we used went down. So our service effectively went down for about 3 hours. Okay. Phone starts ringing off the hook with people that are, of course, angry and upset.
Yeah.
And we even got a one star Google review saying this is a piece of crap and it doesn't work. And of course, you think, oh my God, like you have an outage, sounds bad. That was like one of the most memorable days because I knew that our service was valuable enough for people to actually care.
Yeah.
Right. So what happens, one thing we say, well, how would the world look like with my product?
Wow.
What happens what happens if Google stops working tomorrow? Would you miss it? I think so. 100%. Right. Like where would we go, right? Yeah. So ultimately, like anything you're building, whether it's an idea or something that's already in market, Javon, what happens if you're not around tomorrow?
Yeah.
Will somebody miss or they'll just move on? It's like, okay, I don't care about that product. There's 16 others.
Okay. Good to think of. Now, was this like, when did this thought crystallize? Did you feel it in that moment, or is this something that you've kind of learned over time? Like did it hit right when they send that 1-star review, or was this something in your 3 minutes of pondering?
It's the 3 minutes. It's always it's always reflecting, right? Because and that's the difference when you're in the moment, when you're in the business, you're shooting a video, you're doing, a sales presentation or whatever, it doesn't hit you. That's just your job. You're doing what you got to do, right? To grow or generate revenue, make a living. But again, like reflecting back, all of these are lessons, right? I might have come off that day and said, oh my God, I've had the worst day. Our service went down. We got a 1-star review. What do we do? But then I'm thinking back, I'm like, geez, that was like the best day ever because we're actually relevant.
Yeah. Wow. What a thought, man. Where would the world be without your, well, I don't want to say you, but like without your product in it? What a frame to think of, and like instantly I'm just thinking about every single thing that's going on in my life. Like, oh my gosh, like how would this look? What things do I care about? What things don't I care about?
Right.
That is insane. Wow. So now, where's Reuven's head at? What types of things are you focused on? What types of things are you paying attention to? What types of things are you really after? Is it really just scratching that itch?
Yeah. Again, I love building and seeing the impact of it. Like I every review that comes in, whether if it's, amazing or whether if it's critical, it's knowing that what you're building is making a difference, right? And that's where I get my kicks, right? It's seeing that and knowing that, again, something that was on a napkin 4 years ago is now real. It's got a team and it's got other folks. Like that's the other big side we didn't talk about is just, it's not me. I'm not the company anymore. It's having, we have the most amazing team and we have an incredible culture that all believes in the same thing, right? It's not, if a lot of folks think, well, I've got an idea, wonderful, but I can't do it on my own. I don't have all the skills. I don't have all the time. I don't have all the experience. So it's really finding those, like-minded people that are just going to lay it all on the line and they believe the same thing. So for us, that's why every interaction, like every closing we get, we get these incredible reviews and people are named in those reviews, right? Like, and they'll say, hey, I've had a, great time with Louise was super helpful and all that sort of stuff. Right. And that's because everyone's aligned culturally as well.
Yeah. How did you find them and how did you end up building that culture?
It starts by having a consistent, mission and, to be honest, like made a ton of mistakes, right? I think, lessons learned. And you see that in the textbooks all the time, hire slow, fire fast, but that, that doesn't necessarily explain, what's the right fit. People make all the difference. The right person can 10x your business. The wrong person can 10x your business, but the other way, right? Or even make you crumble. So I think just, understanding the experiences, understanding the patterns, and learning. Again, startup equals experiment. So I've probably made more mistakes than I made good decisions, but I try to learn and reflect and say, here's what I did wrong. Here's what the result was.
Yeah. Now, is there a way that you're like documenting this, or is it all just kind of like in your head? Like, like, is there like this, maybe like maybe you put it on a Google Sheets, maybe you have it on a Google Doc, maybe it's written on your phone somewhere. Kind of like, how are you setting up the experiment and like tracking your hypothesis?
I haven't found a method to the madness, to be honest. It's all in my head, but a friend of mine mentioned, he's done.
You have friends, Reuven?
I got a couple, but
okay.
he mentioned, and he's been through a couple businesses that he grew and sold, and he said, look, I keep literally a folded piece of paper, and it's under my pillow or whatever. Wow. And I have the 10 biggest mistakes that I've made in my business career, and I make it a ritual to review them nightly, and just make sure that I'm not making the same damn mistakes again. Wow. Right. And I guess for him that works.
Yeah.
For me, it's I haven't gotten into that yet. But
when you hear that, are there any big mistakes that come to mind for you?
Well, too many to mention here. I think we're gonna extend this episode by a few more hours. But again, I try to, it goes back to that curiosity is that, making mistakes is a way of learning, right? Yeah. Like everyone that rides a bike, or at least I think almost everyone, kind of falls.
We probably got matching scars.
And yeah, exactly. but then the next thing is, okay, what happens next? Do you get back up, or do you just go crying and saying, I'm never going to ride again, right? So
yeah, that's a good point. Now, if you were to go back and meet the the corporate Reuven,
yeah,
probably a little younger. Did you have hair back then, or what?
At some point, yeah.
I can't even picture you with it. Like this is a good look, man.
Like I said, less prep in the morning.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Do you go to barber, or you cut it yourself?
Cut it myself.
Oh, yeah. Nice, man. That's impressive. I need some help.
You don't want my help.
Hey, man, if it gets my beard to look like yours, I'll take it. So if you were to go back and meet the corporate Reuven, that one that's like coming up with ideas in the workplace, what type of advice would you have for him?
I wouldn't change a thing, to be honest, right? I think I've had, amazing opportunities. I would probably take some more risks, to be honest.
Really?
Like now thinking back, I took some significant risks, but I would amp that up a little bit more.
Okay.
But again, it throughout your career, I think I find it takes time to build that confidence. At first, you're fresh out of school, you're sitting there shaking in your cubicle and don't want to raise too much attention, but I think I would have started that much sooner.
Really? And what do you mean when you say you would have started that much sooner? Like you would have started coming up with ideas?
Or just, be more visible, be more heard. That sort of thing. Yeah.
It's weird that there's so much advice that we get from our parents when we were younger that turn out to be like not the advice that we should have listened to. Like, just sit down and do the work and quiet. Yeah. Put your head down and work, and don't be seen, don't be heard, don't talk. You're a kid. Don't come up with ideas for adults, for whatever.
But it's also, I think it's also a generational thing as well. I think now, folks are more communicative, more outspoken, and maybe when I started my career, where it was more, hey, you know what? You're here to do a job, and you're not necessarily, we don't want you in front of the management committee when you're 20 years old. So
yeah. So if you were to there's one question that I've been chewing on. Yep. Okay, and it's been cool, especially because of my little brother, right? This is why I started the show. But if you were to start a window cleaning company, how would you build it to $100K a month?
I would defy,
You're like, I wouldn't clean windows. No,
I love, I think I love the idea because it's something that everyone needs. Everyone's got windows. Yeah. Windows get dirty. There you go. So we've got a product market fit. Okay. First of all, I think I would build it as a brand.
Okay.
Right.
All right, talk to me.
Well, I feel, there's a lot of services, especially in the services business, they're not brands. Like, it's Joe's Window Cleaning. That's not a brand, right? That's a one man or one woman show, right? What I'm seeing is the emergence of, brands, and with brands come trust, right? So I'd rather go to, some brand of window cleaning and set that up as a brand, spend some of the money up front on, social and advertising and stuff like that. And then, scale that up, right? And scale that up also, obviously you need, Salesforce and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But that's what I would sort of think about as anything, especially in the services or the trades, because so many folks have bad experiences and it's inconsistent. You need a plumber. Again, I don't know who's good. I don't know who's, going to charge me a fair price or rip me off and all that sort of stuff. And I feel like, in that world of small business, we don't necessarily have the assurance that we do, like, let's say with a brand, like say going to, Costco or going to whatever, right?
Yeah. When did you start bringing in the Salesforce for Deeded?
Probably about a couple years in, to be honest.
Couple years in.
Yeah.
So you were doing all of it.
I was doing all of it. It was, grew by, word of mouth and organically as well. We spent a couple of years proving things out, right? Like just understanding where a product fits the market and all that. So before going out and, essentially pouring gas on it, we needed to know that, there's value here and we know what we're doing and we're adding that value and people are seeing the benefits.
Wow. It's really impressive, man. And I love watching it grow. I'm grateful that I get the opportunity to have a front row seat and, watch Reuven into his, what do they call it in Good to Great, that they're not calling it it's not the hockey stick moment, but it's the moment when it hockey sticks,
Yeah.
Like I'm really excited, and it's cool that you mentioned that as the first book. It's the book that I'm reading right now.
Awesome. So there you go.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. So is there anything that the audience can do? How can the audience help you out, man? You've been so gracious and generous with your time today. What can they do to help you along your journey? Where could they follow you? Where could they learn a little bit more? Is there something you want them to download? Don't worry, we'll still do our little ad a little later.
Yeah.
But, where can they learn more about Mr. Reuven Gorsht?
Yeah, I'm active on LinkedIn, so check out, send me a connection request. And if you're
let them know that you listen to the show, that you found them on the podcast.
Absolutely. And if you're thinking of buying or selling property or you're changing on your mortgage, give us a shot at Deeded.ca. We'd love to change that experience entirely for you. So Deeded.ca, click the button and you're ready to go. It's that easy.
Beautiful. Well, thanks so much for tuning into another episode of 100 Ways to Make 100K. I'm your host, javon.ca, and in this episode, we are joined by the legendary Mr. Reuven Gorsht.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.